We also specialise in creative finance. And creative finance is really one of the key things that we can add value to as an investor, because a lot of investors out there, after the third, fourth, fifth property, depending on their income, hit a wall where they're what we call maxed out in a typical lending scenario. And what we do is we can go to the next level and we can show you strategies that will enable you to keep buying properties, even though you don't have cash flow advantage anymore in terms of negative gearing benefits and so forth. So we can get through and help a lot of our clients buy properties where they've been to banks and other financiers and mortgage brokers and they've said, no, you're maxed out, we're not going to give you any more money. We can go and get that extra property and that extra deal. In terms of the lenders, we pretty much have everyone. Okay, so we have access to every lender pretty much in Australia. There's a lot of these lenders that are no longer around, and if you look at the list of lenders that we can access, people like Macquarie, for example, have pulled out of the mortgage market. Bluestone Mortgages, there's a number of lenders that have actually pulled out, and it's an interesting thing because I constantly get asked this question, Conrad, what's the highest loan-to-value ratio that I can get in the current environment? Because in the past, there were situations where you could have borrowed 106% loan-to-value ratio. Okay, who's had a loan of 106% here? Yeah, which covers your purchase of your property and your stamp duty and closing costs. So those loans are no longer available. At the moment, the highest loan-to-value ratio is pretty much 100% loan-to-value ratio, plus lender's mortgage insurance. I'll cover lender's mortgage insurance as we go as well. So that's pretty much the maximum loan-to-value ratio. Now, the interesting thing is that the lending environment, there's been a lot of stuff in the media lately with regards to the subprime fallout. Who's heard that stuff on the media? Yeah? There's been a lot of coverage around the world. Different markets are affected. Banks are falling over in the US. The stock market's been affected to a large extent. And really the subprime has an effect to some extent into Australian lending environment as well. The thing with Australia is that our exposure to non-conforming lending or the subprime lending has been much lower than the one in the US. So we've basically had a fraction of exposure compared to what they've gone through. But really, just to give you a bit of background, with lending in Australia, lenders source their funding from two sources in Australia. The first source is what we call balance sheet lending, and the second source is securitized funding. Now, balance sheet lending is when a bank, like it could be one of the four major banks, or ING, St. George, when they have savings accounts or term deposit accounts, and the Australian public parks their money in that company or bank, and then they lend it out to the general public. So ING has a savings account, for example, and they offer you a rate of return. They take your money and they lend it out at a higher rate of return. And the difference, this is a very simplified version of how they operate, but the gap is their profit. So that's basically balance sheet lending. Now, securitized funding is when people like Macquarie, who don't have those saving facilities, go out to the overseas money markets and they buy funding wholesale from pension funds and fund managers in the US. And those lenders have been affected dramatically by the recent subprime fallout. And they're the ones that have been pulling out of the market. So why it's important to you to understand as an investor or as a potential investor is because people like St. George, ING haven't been really affected to the same extent as other lenders like Macquarie and some of the non-conforming lenders in Australia. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play you a quick 6-minute clip, which is an interview with one of the top leading private bankers in the world talking about the subprime fallout. Now, I must warn some of you, the clip does contain British humour, so some of you will be offended by the contents of this clip.
Ladies and gentlemen, John Bird and John Fortune.
George Parr, you are an investment banker.
I am, yes.
Yes. And as such, you have your fingers right on the pulse of the financial market.
Yeah, very much so, yes.
And during the summer, there's been a great deal of turbulence and volatility
in the market. Yes, tremendous. Yes, tremendous.
Yes. And what has caused that?
Well, you have to remember two things about the markets. One is that they are made up of very sharp and sophisticated people who these are the greatest brains in the world. And the second thing you have to remember is that the financial markets, to use the common phrase, are driven by sentiment.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? Well, things, let's say, are just going along as normal in the market, and then suddenly, out of the blue, one of these very sharp and sophisticated people says, "My God, something awful's going to happen! We lost everything. Oh, my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
Shall I jump out of the window?
Shall I jump out of the window? Let's all jump out of the window.
Oh, sell!
We've lost a sell.
Yes.
Precisely. Yes. Precisely. And then a few days later, this same sophisticated person says, I think things are going rather well. And everybody says, actually, I agree with you. I think we're rich. We're rich. Yes.
Rich.
Yes.
Bye.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's what we call market sentiment.
Yes. Surely we are exaggerating just a bit, aren't we?
I don't know. I mean, in the middle of August this year, when the market absolutely plunged in London, a well-known city firm, State Street Global Markets, issued a statement in which it said, and I quote, "Market participants don't know whether to buy on the rumour and sell on the news, do the opposite, do both, or do neither, depending on which way the wind is blowing," unquote.
Yes, and this is the kind of rigorous analysis that companies will pay huge salaries for.
Yes, exactly. And a few days later, when the markets had gone up a little bit, the senior equities advisor on ABM Ambro Morgan said, and I quote, "We're back to happy days again."
Well, no price is too high for that kind of mature wisdom.
Certainly not. This sort of people are paid millions of pounds in bonuses.
Yes, of course. During this summer, there have been actual causes behind the volatility in the markets, haven't there? I mean, specifically and especially in America, granting vast numbers of mortgages to people who can't afford them on properties which are diminishing in value.
It's a so-called subprime situation, yes.
The subprime
market.
Yes. How does that work, in fact?
Well, imagine, if you can, say, an unemployed black man sitting on a crumbling porch somewhere in Alabama in his string vest, and a chap comes along and said, "Would you like to buy this house before it falls down? And why do you let me lend you the money?"
And is this chap who says this, is he a banker?
Oh, no. He's a mortgage salesman. His income depends entirely on the number of mortgages that he can arrange.
So his judgment to arrange mortgages is completely objective?
Completely objective, yes. Absolutely.
It would. Yes. And what happens next?
Well, then this debt, this mortgage, is taken, bought by a bank and packaged together on Wall Street with a lot of other similar debts.
Without going into much detail about what is actually...
Without going into any detail. No, it's far too boring. And so this is put into a package of debt, and then it's moved on to Wall Street, and this is extraordinary what happens then, that somehow this package of dodgy debts stops being a package of dodgy debts and starts being what we call a structured investment vehicle.
An SIV?
An SIV, exactly, yes.
Yes, I see. And then someone like you comes along and buys it.
I buy it, yes, and then I will ring up, I don't know, somebody in Tokyo and say, "Look, I've got this package, do you want to buy it?" And they say, "What's in it?" I say, "I haven't got the faintest idea." And they say, "How much do you want for it?" And I say, $100 million, and then they say, "Fine, that's it." And that's the market.
And presumably this package, I mean, that kind of thing can happen several times to the same package.
Possibly, yes.
And every time it does, of course, then you or someone like you will get a fee and a markup
and a profit, yes.
And so
well, if I'm expected to do it for nothing, it's hard work.
In view of the fact that in these packages there's a lot of dodgy debt, what is it about it that attracts the financial, risk takers?
Yes, well, because these hedge funds, as they're called, which specialise in these debts, they all have very good names.
You mean they're responsible companies?
No, I don't. It's nothing to do with their reputation. They have actually very, very good names. The names they think up of them are very good. I'll give you an example. There's a very well-known American Wall Street firm called Bear Stearns, who have two of these hedge funds which specialize in these mortgage debts. And they lost so much money, lost so much of its value, that Bear Stearns announced that they would have to put in $3.2 billion into one of the funds to try and keep it afloat.
$3.2 billion?
3.2 billion, yes. And even then they said the investors couldn't get any money out of it and they were going to let the other fund go. But one of these funds was called the High Grade Structured Credit Strategies Fund, and the other was called the High Grade Structured Credit Enhanced Leverage Fund.
Well, that sounds very good.
That's good, isn't it? Yeah.
Sounds very trustworthy.
This is the magic of the market. What started off as lending a few $1,000s to an unemployed black man in a string vest has become a high-grade structured credit enhanced leverage fund.
I like the sound of it.
It is good. Well, it sounds very trustworthy. I mean, it's got good words in it. It's got words like high.
High is good.
High is good. Yes, better than low, anyway, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
And structured is another good word.
Very good.
Enhanced.
I love enhanced.
Enhanced is there.
I mean, I'd buy anything if it said enhanced.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It might have been different if it said the unemployed black man in the string vest fund, but
yes, because then alarm bells might start to ring. But despite these very plausible names, surely the reality is that the people that lent all this money have been incredibly stupid.
Oh, no. The reality is that what was stupid is that at some point somebody asked how much money these houses were actually worth. I mean, if they hadn't bothered to ask that question, then everything would have gone on as perfectly normal. But unfortunately, they did.
I see, but now, you see, people are saying the crisis is likely to turn into a financial meltdown. I mean, can that be avoided?
It can be avoided, provided that governments and central banks give us, the financial speculators, back the money that we've lost.
But isn't that rewarding greed and stupidity?
No. It's rewarding what the Prime Minister Gordon Brown called the ingenuity of the markets. That is it.
You see, and
we don't want this money to spend on ourselves. We want this money just to go into the market so that we can carry on borrowing and lending money as if nothing had happened without thinking too much about it.
Yes, but if the worst came to the worst and you didn't get this money, what then?
Well, then there'd be another market crash, and then I would say to you what people like me always say, that it's not us that will suffer, it's your pension fund.
Thank you very much, George Parr.
A pleasure.